to a series brought to you by GALvanize. My name is Brittnee Brooks, and I have the phenomenal opportunity to chat with my girl, Kayla Drescher, also known as the Magician in Heels. You can catch her all over the nation, performing unique and engaging magic at corporate events, colleges, cocktail hours, and even on the big stage, just like NBC's Today Show, where David Copperfield chose her for the next great magician. And she also has a podcast called Shazam, which I love. I was so intrigued by how much of a superstar magician that you are and how much you really do have in common. So I wanted to ask you, how is the world of magic similar to the world of sports when it comes to welcoming women?
They're actually really similar, and I've learned more and more about that in the last year or so. So I was an athlete my whole life. So I played basketball, and I follow women's college basketball, WNBA, and I follow a lot of what's been going on in terms of women fighting for more equality, higher pay, all of that within the world of women's sports. Women are often seen as they have a very specific role to play, which is either the assistant to the male magician, or if they're going to do magic themselves, they usually get asked, and I'm one of those people that got asked this, was to be super duper sexy on stage. And it's weird because it's either, you can't do anything in between. You either have to be the assistant or the super sexy, or you have to be really, really masculine. You have to wear a male suit and basically hide your femininity as much as possible. It's kind of tough. And within magic, women aren't necessarily seen as able to perform magic themselves. Magic is written by and for guys. There's very few pieces of magic that are designed specifically for women. And if they are, they're like bright pink and fluffy and glittery. So there's a lot of similarities, I think, as well, specifically within sports reporting. It seems like there's also a really specific type of woman that gets put on the front line of the reporting. She has to look a specific way. She's a specific age range. And so there's a lot of that similarity as well.
Amen, sister. You're speaking my language. Thank you for sharing that. You started the podcast Shazam, which I love the name of that. That is so awesome. What is the purpose of your podcast, and what is one thing you would like a young woman such as myself to take away from just one of your episodes?
So the podcast started a couple of years ago. I had just been really fed up with how women were being treated within magic. I had particularly had a slew for about that whole summer of just a slew of issues that just boiled my pot over. And I just had to do something about it. I had to shut the fire off somehow. So I contacted a friend of mine, and we started the podcast. And the podcast is the first resource ever in magic to exist specifically for and about women. Most representation of women in magic, so on podcasts, in books, and resources, wherever magicians are seen as an expert on a topic, on average, those experts featured are 5% women. So it's pretty low. Podcasts are more than anything else, but there are some that have featured 0 women. There are some that have featured 1. We wanted to make sure that we were featuring really strong women within the magic community doing really great things. And then also discussing how magic accidentally, in a sense, alienates women. We wanted to highlight the experience of women within magic. And then slowly that built to telling magicians that half of what you're doing is actually alienating to mass amounts of your audience, either because you've made a homophobic joke, a transphobic joke, a sexist joke, a racist joke, because you think it's funny, but then you realize, oh wait, that's not funny. I'm actually being insulting to groups of my audience. The main thing that we want young women to take away from the podcast is, I have this theory that I call the brick theory, which is every time somebody tells you or you experience something that makes it feel like you can't do magic as is, then a layer of brick gets laid in this wall. And for a while you can hop over the brick wall, but eventually it gets too tall to where you just quit and don't want to hop over the wall anymore. So that happens a lot in magic. I think that happens a lot in all industries is that you just constantly are getting this layer of brick laid every time something happens. And eventually you just don't want to put in the effort to jump over the wall. Learning about other women and their struggles and what they did to accomplish their goals, and just knowing that there's a support system, is a community of people. And we've seen with the podcast a significant amount of guys come forward and say, I'm also here to provide support, which is new and amazing to see that on such a wide scale. The main thing we want to have people take away is that there is in fact a community, even though sometimes it feels really lonely.
I really appreciate you starting a podcast in which specifically you call it a safe space. That's like one thing I love to have, is just having a safe space. And whether that be in magic or in sports, like there has to be a space where someone can share how they're feeling. So I have to say our personalities are very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We have intentional conversations. We're super goofy. I love to be silly. It seems as though you like that as well. So do you ever feel that pressure to continue to entertain, even like when you're off the stage or like off your podcast?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I would much rather make people laugh than have like a heart-to-heart conversation. So it's much more fun for me to entertain people. I am always this goofy and I'm always this ridiculous. So I feel like there's always sort of this pressure when people see me and know that on stage I'm funny and goofy and entertaining, and then they expect that in real life. One thing that differs between my onstage persona and my podcast persona is on the podcast, that comes out a lot more because we're talking about such intense subjects. So when I literally have to say on the podcast, stop touching women, like just stop it. And then people go, well, I'm offended by that because what happens if this? And then I have to be like, no, I'm going to be blunt and harsh with you right now. And so there's a little bit of a difference there where people kind of get jarred by my bluntness from the podcast. But even so, I try to make that bluntness somewhat entertaining and funny to soften the blow, if you will.
I never could be such an amazing magician such as yourself. If there's one thing you believe that could make someone's life more magical if they implemented it, like what would that one thing be to make someone's life more magical?
Cool. So I have two answers. So one is slightly more literal than the other. So the literal answer is, I think everyone should learn a little bit of magic. Just a couple of tricks, and not the tricks you could learn, like the dealing 3 rows of 7 cards and, asking, not, actual sleight of hand, because once you learn a little bit of magic, so much of your thinking slightly shifts on, oh, I didn't realize that I could do these 3 things at the same time and have this result. So you see the world in a really different way. Non-actual magic thing that I say that I think everybody should do is, I think everyone needs to have a living thing that's not a human being. Just even a succulent plant in your home. Thank you. Yes. Well done to you, Brittnee. Yes, plants. Have a living thing that you have to care a little bit for, I think really does add a little bit of spice to your day. And it just makes me really happy to know that if I just put a little water on a plant, it's going to survive and keep going. And if it gets sick, then I have to make it better. And waking up and having my dog yell at me to go on a walk is like the happiest part of my day. So I think everybody should have a living thing around them that's not a human. So great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you have a great rest of your day, sister. And I'm a big fan of you, and you're an inspiration. And every time I buy a plant, you know exactly who I'm going to think of. Yeah, Kayla said so.
That's all I've ever wanted.
Kayla said so.
Yeah, thanks, Brittnee. Bye.
Bye, girl.